Madam Secretary, thank you for that testimony. I would bring everyone's attention to the Department of Commerce's strategic plan. We actually have one called Open for America's Business, on how the Secretary is cutting across a variety of her agencies to generate jobs. But Madam Secretary, 62% of the Department of Commerce budget lies in NOAA.
Yes.
And that 62% in NOAA really goes primarily to satellites, and it also goes to weather service. Many of the questions here, however, will be related to fisheries management, which is one of the issues that frequently comes up from this coalition of coastal senators. But my question will go exactly to the satellite questions raised by Senator Shelby and strongly felt by myself. As you know, there was an independent review about the closing or eliminating the weather gap. Also a great concern to Senator Mikulski because of the way the satellites work, what it does for Alaska, what it does for us in the world. When will we get your comprehensive plan, and how do you see that you want to continue to get right the concerns that have been addressed in both the Inspector General's report and in that independent review commissioned by this commission, so we get $1 worth of value for our satellites?
Well, thank you all for your support of the satellite programs. They're extremely important, and as you're aware, satellite procurement is a very complex process. It really involves procuring instruments, procuring a bus, procuring launch, and procuring a ground station, and getting all of that to occur at the same time. So the NOAA satellites program have been, recently through the outside report that we received, well managed and are on time and on budget as we speak today. And these are obviously, as I said in my testimony, critical assets to provide accurate information to decision makers. As we address the issue, the challenge of the gap that was discussed, first of all, I want to thank you for taking the most important and first step of funding the instruments that can be used for a gap filler, because that is an essential step, a critical step in the procurement process as I described. We need to make sure those are procured first. As we look at the gap, right now, it's still, the potential for a gap is still too high. So what our approach to addressing this is to first, as it relates to JPSS-1, is to make sure that it is on schedule, which it is. And what we're trying to do now is to move JPSS-2 so that there's greater overlap with the JPSS-1 program. To do that, we need to have the procurement of, as I said, the instruments, the bus, the ground system, and the launch all occur.
Madam Secretary, I'm going to jump in because we all each are going to follow the 5-minute rule. I'm going to get in as many of my colleagues as I can. As I understand it, you are standing really sentry over this.
Yes.
We expect also a further cost estimate in April. Later in April? Am I correct in that?
I'm not sure of the exact timing, but we will get you that cost estimate.
That they're actively, we understand NOAA says they're actively working on a plan to be issued with the latest independent cost estimates as late as April 2014. We need that.
Yes.
As we get ready to look, and let me finish. The other thing is, I'm going to just thank you in terms of your personal involvement, and also Dr. Kathy Sullivan, the new CEO of NOAA. First of all, I've heard from my other colleagues her availability to discuss issues, particularly these prickly fisheries issues. So we want to thank the fact that we feel communication has improved with NOAA. Good. We feel that the oversight on satellites and some other programs have improved on NOAA. We want to keep that momentum going to get value for our dollar, and at the same time, this communication, we resolve problems without trying to put it in report language. So I can't tell you how important. And, if you listen to our fishermen and our watermen, if they're cranky, these fishermen put their hooks into us. And I don't want to be caught in a cranky waterman's net in Maryland. So I think we all get that. I could pursue my questions because I'm going to come back to the Weather Service. I want to also advise my colleagues we will be having a separate hearing on NIST in May because of the crucial, those from manufacturing to cybersecurity to whatever, an innovative hearing. I'm going to go back to the job issue and ask, one is to create more jobs. The other is to retain the jobs we have, and even the possibility of bringing jobs back home from overseas. But here goes to my question about trade and trade missions. Put that up.
Yes, ma'am.
And the job of the Secretary of Commerce has been, as I said, the President's ambassador to business and the ambassador of business to the President. And often they've led trade missions around the world. So it's been both an executive position, a sales position, and you have 11 different agencies from NIST to NOAA to trade. So we're talking everything about red snapper quotas to import quotas and export quotas and so on. So here goes to my question. Often the traditional role is assumed by the Secretary of Commerce. Tell us what you're doing. Are you leading trade missions? How do you see your role in that generating jobs, retaining jobs, and even trying to bring jobs back home?
Well, Senator, first of all, thank you for the question. You know, since day one and I took this job, I brought with a sign to my office, and it says "Open for Business." And to me, this is why is that my area of focus? That's my area of focus because I know that if we create the conditions for the private sector to thrive, they will create jobs. And one of the things, so we are working, you know, one of the first things I've done is spend a lot of time with business leaders to understand what do they need in order to be successful. I've met with probably over 1,000 CEOs and private sector business leaders since I've been in this position. And what have they said to me that they need in order to grow their businesses? So for example, in terms of trade and investment, I'm very focused on the fact that 95% of customers live outside our borders. So while American businesses are growing within the United States, our job with both our U.S. Export Assistance Center and our Foreign Commercial Service is to help those businesses continue to export. And why? Because 11.3 million Americans today, their jobs depend upon exports, and that's up 1.6 million jobs since 2009. That's why funding of our USVACs and our Foreign Commercial Service is so important. At the same time, we're also trying to attract foreign direct investment. 5.6 million American jobs today are supported by American subsidiaries of foreign-owned companies. That's why funding of Select USA is so important, that we build upon these good jobs. And we know they're good jobs because the jobs in foreign direct investment, from foreign direct investment companies pay over $77,000 a year. I recently as well returned from several trade missions. First, I was in Mexico, and then I was in the Middle East. And I will tell you that on our trip to Mexico, I took a company from Los Angeles called Luro Electronics. They came back and said that because of the 5 different potential business opportunities that they found, they're increasing their workforce by 10%. So we know that all of these efforts are helping to grow jobs in this country. I'm also very focused on innovation, competitiveness, and entrepreneurship. Why? Because I know that if we, I think it's 40% of our GDP, and I'll confirm that statistic, depends upon new innovation. Growth in our GDP, 40% depends upon new innovation. What are we doing specifically? I've made skills and workforce development a priority of the department for the very first time in history, working with the Department of Labor to say, how does the Department of Labor and Commerce affect something that I think is very important, which is workforce training needs to be business-led. We can no longer, as the Secretary of Labor would say, train and pray. We have got to offer people the kind of nationally recognized stackable credentials that they know when they go and get that training, there are jobs at the end of that endeavor. And so, to me, that's a very important part of helping to grow and fill the 4 million open jobs that we have today in this country by helping the long-term unemployed be prepared for those jobs. Another thing that we at the department are focused on, which I believe is very focused on job creation, is we're working across the agencies to promote the passage of the NNMI bill and develop these regional manufacturing hubs. Building a bridge between R&D and getting to market is something that requires some catalyst from the federal government, and those will also lead to good jobs. And the institutes, I think, are a brilliant conception by both Congress and the President, because the federal money, why is the federal money important? I've talked to the people who put together these institutes, and they said without the catalyst of the federal dollars, they would not have come together, the universities, the private sector, the community colleges, and the workforce training system, as well as the supply chains, in order to address this need for pre-competitive research in our country. And we're doing so much less of this than other countries around the world. And I think this is something that is very, very important to job creation.
Madam Secretary, I think I've got the picture there, and we want to work with you. I'm going to make sure that Senator Collins has a chance to ask her questions.
Terrific, thank you.
She's on about 3 other subcommittees, so we'll come back to pick up. No, that was excellent, and we could spend all day just on that, as well as the need for interagency cooperation. My smaller manufacturers say they need the Import-Export Bank, they need the Foreign Commercial Service Office, and they need to be able to know more how to use the resources of their own government. On this whole fishery disasters, one of the first issues we had was our very own colleagues didn't understand how fisheries disaster certification worked. They thought it was FEMA that designated it, as compared to you, Madam Secretary. So one of these areas we really need to do is educate our own colleagues, and we need to look forward to doing that communication. Fisheries disasters has affected pretty much every area of the coast. As we worked on the New England fisheries disaster, we note that our colleagues on both sides of the aisle from the Pacific Northwest, Merkley, Murray, Mikulski, regardless of the zip code they lived in, were facing that. And we see that it's 3 things: environmental consequences, but mostly overfishing.
Right.
Overfishing, and it's not overfishing by us and how we enforce those laws, and then also the ability to collect better data. And then if overfishing is caused by poachers, why punish the American fishermen as they're trying to make their comeback? And we need clear guidelines, too, on how we do help with fishery disasters. We want to avoid them, but we saw the near collapse of Georgia's bank. We heard what was happening in the Pacific Northwest. The decline in crabs in Maryland was due to the decline in the Chesapeake Bay. That was environmental. So we've got a lot to do, but this is big business, and it's also, I might add, a part of our psychic identity. It's when you think of Maine and you think of Maryland and you think of the great Pacific Northwest, yes, you might think of microphone. And when you have Senator Shelby talking about the red snapper, I've heard Senator Shelby speak about many things, but this shows the concern we have, so let's work together on it. Before Senator Coons goes, I'm going to raise this issue about the Patent Office and its fees. You said the fiscal 13 situation. Didn't you mean sequester? Did the Patent Office have access to the fees that were being paid in sequester? Or were they denied access to fees?
There was an amount that was set aside that we did not have access to. We feel that the fiscal year 15, or the $3.4 billion that fees that we expect this year will help address the issues that we experienced back then.
Well, I'm going to raise the fee issue. There are two important agencies that are crucial to innovation and taking products to market and protecting intellectual property and the safety of people: the FDA and the Patent Office. My biotech community, which is a very thriving community, feels they stand in two lines to get approved: FDA and the Patent Office. So we've struggled with backlogs. Both are funded by user fees. FDA, under sequester, did not have access to the user fees. The biotech, the pharma, the medical device community was ballistic. They're paying fees. They think they were going to get value, but the reason they're paying fees was to get the trained workforce that they needed with the new innovative technology. They didn't have access. Right now, Dr. Hamburger's got $225 million worth of fees she thinks she's going to have for this year and maybe into 16. Remember, we have not canceled sequester. So then we go to your patent office, which is really our patent office. It is crucial to every new idea, every new product, every new thing that could come out of Maine, Delaware, Maryland, you know, our great universities, all the things you've just talked about. So here is my question. I worry about this, and I really think OMB has to worry about this. And I think they have to come to grips with what we would hope. Many of us want to work on a bipartisan basis to permanently cancel sequester. That would be my goal, so that every year, talented managers that we ask to come into government, like yourself, are not worried about sequester. You're worried about fulfilling the mission. But if we go to the private sector, we're asking them to pay fees so they can have the capacity to fulfill the mission, which is patents, food safety, and the safety of pharmaceuticals, biotech, and medical devices. They should be able to get what they're paying for. So I would encourage you to join with Dr. Mary Hamburg at FDA and go to OMB and say, not right now, not for this year, thanks to the Murray-Ryan budget, again, a bipartisan effort, we're able to move ahead with this bill, but I'm looking ahead also to 2016, so that we keep the momentum going in our economy. We've come a long way since the economic collapse. We know unemployment's going down. We know the deficit's going down. We know that the debt is going down. We want to keep that momentum going. And one of the ways to keep it going is to make sure where some of the greatest innovation is occurring in our economy is enabled to have access to the government agencies they need to either get approval or protect their intellectual property. That's why, and they're paying for it, not only with their taxes, but with an additional thing, a fee. So if we could get, and I'm going to be raising this with the Director Burrell herself, that we need to make sure that if sequester continues, which I hope it does not, and we'll work hard for it not to, that those where fees are paid are not disadvantaged, because the private sector says, we work with you to create a fee structure that is reasonable, rational, and achievable, and then we put the money in the pot and they can't access it. So we can't have this. It's counterintuitive to what we want to do. So I really encourage that. Does that pretty much, and to my colleagues, to be able to raise this, because there are also other fees, but these are really the two very important ones that I think have a direct impact on jobs and also the direct impact on our economy. And we look forward to working with you and the administration on solving this. Well, I think we've covered a lot of ground here today. You know, the Department of Commerce has 11 different agencies in it, from taking the census to minority business development. It's a lot to keep an eye on, and you were able to, did you feel like this was a pop quiz? Well, we wish you well in your
Thank you.
trade missions and really working throughout these agencies to really, again, you know, create the kind of jobs that we need to create. Thank you very much for participating. If there are no further questions, senators may submit additional questions to the subcommittee for the official record. We request that the Department of Commerce respond to our colleagues within 30 days. This subcommittee will now stand in recess to May 1st at 10 a.m. when we take the testimony of the NASA Administrator, Charles Bolden. I also wish to announce that there will be a full committee hearing on two things in which we hope to create jobs. One of which, on April 29th, we will be holding a full committee hearing, all hands on deck, on innovation, particularly in terms of life science and others, where we'll listen to everyone from NIH to DARPA to the Department of Energy. Also, later on in the spring, the date will be announced shortly. We will be having a full committee hearing on physical infrastructure, how we have to look across the committees on our physical infrastructure needs, whether it's in transportation, water and sewer, and our ports. Excuse me? Yes, but that's transportation. But our ports themselves, there are big ships coming through the Panama Canal. Maryland's ready. And, well, we looked ahead and got ourselves ready. But we need viable ports. We want those imports and exports. And Japan is one of our great trading partners with Toyotas and motorcycles. Anyway, we will be holding a full committee hearing on kind of an infrastructure appropriation, so we know that every subcommittee is looking at, by physical infrastructure, using this year's appropriations, how we can have a horizontal view on what this means to creating jobs and yet getting value for our dollar, solving important problems in transportation, the environment through public works, getting our ports ready for the new ships in the new century. So these are the kinds of things we'll be doing, and therefore, though the committee for now stands in recess until the full committee hearing on April 29th, and this subcommittee May 1st for NASA.